Are you really concerned about the poor? The concern is always the same, although it takes many forms. Is it fair to let someone starve to death on the streets, while a millionaire throws a party on the other side of the wall? We're not talking about income redistribution, social justice, or any nonsense like that. We're talking about the basic minimum for survival. Is it fair to let someone starve if there's plenty of food left for others? Is it fair to let someone die sick if we already have medicines or a cure for the disease, simply because that medicine or cure is too expensive for that person to pay? Is it fair to let a patient who needs a kidney transplant die if you can donate one of your kidneys to him? Well, after all, life is sacred, isn't it? It is our most valuable thing. We all have the right to life. It's right there in the Constitution. Well, it's not quite like that. In the legal sphere, there's a term called erga omnes. It translates roughly into against everyone, and it means that a certain something is valid against everyone else. The right to property, for example, is erga omnes. The fact that you own a portion of real estate means that everyone else in the world does not own the same portion of real estate that you do. If anyone else enters your property without your permission, you can remove them from there. When it comes to the law, another important legal term is that of negative rights. It means that you have a right that people do not do something to you. The negative right prohibits people from doing something, and the opposite of this is the positive right. A positive right means that you have a right for people to do something. The positive right is not to be confused with positive law though, which is the law written and enacted by men in the form of legislature. Negative rights can also be positivized. The property right is a negative erga omnes right. You can use it against everyone else in the world. All people in the world are forbidden to enter your property, of course, unless you consent to it. Likewise, there are other individual rights of this type. All of them are negative and erga omnes. For example, the right to physical integrity, which says that everyone else in the world must respect the self-ownership you exercise over your own body. You can demand from anyone on the street that they don't harm you, that your body is not used in any way without your consent. You also have the right to freedom. You can demand from anyone on the street that they don't stop you from doing something, as long as it doesn't go against the NAP, also erga omnes and negative. The term individual right emerged exactly as a group of basic negative erga omnes rights, which were intended to protect the individual from the rest of society, especially from the government. These rights arose mainly at the time of the American Revolution, but the government quickly realized that people were very fond of the word rights, as it got more and more popular around the world. And that's because individual rights really are the best representation of the basic ethics we had until then. And these negative erga omnes rights really are basic ethics. They are indeed very few by definition. But politicians can get quite creative when the game consists of inventing stuff to win elections. The Americans themselves started this game. One of the rights in their Declaration of Independence is the right to the pursuit of happiness. What does that even mean? That you have the right to compel anyone on the street to make you happy? Of course not. The trick here is that you have a right to pursue happiness, not a right to happiness itself. In the end, that right means absolutely nothing, but politicians just need more and more tools to deceive their voters. Instead of going for valid, or at the very least innocuous things like the pursuit of happiness, they went even further. Politicians invented a second generation of rights, the so-called social rights, like the rights to health, education, work, security, justice, and so on. Nowadays, real rights are called first-generation rights. And then, they even invented the third generation of rights, the so-called diffuse rights, which are the rights to a healthy environment, ecology, and etc. There are even those who speak of a new fourth generation of rights, which would involve respect for transsexuals, minorities in general, and so on. Nobody argues that education, health, security, and justice aren't important things. This also applies to ecology, the environment, respect, and etc. But those are not real rights, because they're not erga omnes nor negative. You can't force someone on the street to provide you with education, or health, or anything else for that matter. When you say education is a right, the meaning of the word right is distorted. There may be a law that says that X% of the state budget goes into investment in education, that free education for all must be provided and all that. But that's just what that is, it's a law, it's not a right. Because it's neither erga omnes nor negative. This law will require the government to steal people's money through taxes in order to pay for such a service. In practice, that's what happens in most countries under the name of right to education. Nowadays, there is no real right to education. What exists is a law that says the government will provide something like education in public schools, and for that, it will extort you with taxes. Note that, unlike real rights, which only bring benefits to the individual, this case isn't exclusively positive for him. At the same time that the government gives something to the individual, in this case education, it also takes something away from him, like taxes. Is it better for people to pay for education directly, or to give money to the government for it to pay for education? Of course, it's much better to pay directly for the service. And it's not even that the government is inefficient. The issue here goes much deeper. The government is only a mechanism for social domination and exploitation. It's not intended to provide education for anyone. Its goal is exclusively to enrich politicians and civil servants. Education, health, and other things are just some alms that it gives back to you in order to pretend that it has some function, and therefore to convince most people to pay their taxes without complaining too much. The same goes for justice and security. Which one is better? Would you rather pay for your security or pay the government to pay for your security? Evidently, it is ideal that you pay for it directly. The quote-unquote right to security, that is, justice and police, is provided by the government to the population just like alms to a beggar, similarly as with education and health. But in this case, it goes further. The police and the justice system are clearly an oppressive instrument of the government to further exploit the population, preventing it from getting out of line and failing to pay taxes. Likewise, it would be much better for everyone, even for the poorest, to pay for security and justice directly, instead of paying taxes for the government to pay for these things for you. But socialists will always say, the government redistributes wealth. The poor pay less taxes than the rich, but receive the same service in public schools. A person with no money would not be able to pay for justice and security. Now this argument is absolutely invalid because the government never redistributes income. By its very definition, it always concentrates wealth. The stronger the government, the larger the concentration. The cheapest form of security is self-security. In Ancapistan, if you have no money to hire a security company, your alternative is to buy a weapon and defend yourself. Oh, but what if I'm still robbed? What if I don't have the money to hire a lawyer or a court to get my property back? Well, in this case, there would still be the alternative of selling the rights to sue, also known as securitization. You suffered violence from someone else, but you have no money to request the prosecution of that person, so you sell that right to a third party who will happily do that for you. Of course, you will still receive a little bit less, because the ones who buy the right are still bearing the risk of not being reimbursed, but still, they will receive some compensation. Whoever bought the right sues the person and gets the compensation at the end. In a stateless, tax-free society, everything would be much cheaper than it is today. From now on, whenever you buy something, look at the percentage of the price that goes to taxes. Not only will you receive more, without the income tax and state-regulated labor benefits, but look at how much of your work's value slips out of your hands in the form of taxes currently. Without taxes, the world will be led to an absurd decrease in world poverty. The number of poor people will drop to almost zero. The problem of having those who are dispossessed, without anything to eat, or who have neither money to pay for basic health treatment or a health plan, or to pay for their safety even, will be cases of poverty. Fortunately, there will be plenty of money left over for people to do charity. And people will do charity because they always have done it. It is nothing but human nature to care for the welfare of others. Now, what we can't do is forcefully expropriate anyone's wealth, that is, rob them, with the excuse of helping others. Whoever gives up freedom to have security ends up with neither. Thank you for watching. This article was written by Peter Turgenev, translated into English by Ancapistan, revised by Albert Jr., and narrated by Ancapistan. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up icon below and share the video in your social networks. If you want to be notified of other videos, hit the subscribe button and then the bell icon.